Sounds like a plan.
Look at you, man. Here we go. This is the moment that I've been waiting for. You were what? Number 3 on Chat with Gunner. And now if you look at the top of the screen, it says 147. Gary Lamb in the building. What's up, brother?
Back again.
Dude, it's crazy. You know, I was going back. I listened to that episode again. And you mentioned some things like, you know, the reason you wanted to kind of follow the podcast was because you wanted me to stay consistent. And I said I'd be there every Thursday and I'd do it. That's kind of transitioned a little bit. And you talked about you were starting a podcast at that time that didn't get off the ground, but you now have your studio set up. You're in it right now.
Set up. I think one of my biggest faults is I have too many things. I'm juggling too many balls at the same time. I got everything, and it's literally been sitting in a box for 2 years. Finally got it set up. It was time to shit or get off the pot. And here we are, ready to get going, dealing with some minor tweaks to everything that I just got set up. But hopefully in the next week or two, we'll be launching the Black Sheep project, and I'm excited about that.
Well, hey, you've had the logo and you've had the brand out for a while. I guess that's one of the biggest parts is getting the name out there and branding. And you do a fantastic job with community, like I've mentioned. I don't know of anybody that I know personally that does it better. But for the people that don't know you, that come to the show and listen to this, which is by far our most viewed platform in any type of podcasting, is LinkedIn, every show. So kind of tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Man, I am Gary Lamb, and I know it sounds fucking cliche, but I'm the epitome of a hustler. I do all kinds of stuff. I own a wrestling promotion, working on getting an MMA promotion up and going, own a t-shirt company that's very successful. I put on large scale events. My big thing that everyone knows me for is called Barbecue and Brews, barbecue and craft beer festivals all over North Georgia. Put on back to the 80s experiences with the Guardians of the Jukebox Band. Do a lot of events for a lot of cities. And I'm working on a couple of things, working on some big things that I'm not really at liberty to talk about yet, but always have my hands in different things. I grew up with a dad who my whole life stressed to me, do what you love with your life. He used to always tell me, it's too late for me. I'm stuck in this job that I hate. Don't let that happen to you. And so in my life, I am 46 years old. I have worked for someone else about 18 months of those 46 years. And since I was 16, I've owned my own company when I started a baseball shop.
Yeah, it's wild. You know, I was listening back to some of the stuff, the thrift store that you had back in the day. You've always just kind of been able to just take a niche and it'll be like, you know, I can make some money in this. And I'm not going to do it as a hobby. I'm just going to figure out a way to make some money. And like I've mentioned, your ability to put together a community, from what I've seen through Facebook in that Canton area, is second to none. By far, no doubt.
I'm invested in this community. I've been here 18 years. I moved here. Surprisingly, one of the things I left off was I moved here to start a church 18 years ago. I started that church here in the area. It exploded, took off, was one of the fastest growing churches in America. I kind of self-imploded. My talent exceeded my character. I lost everything. And when it came time to figuring out what was next, I just stayed in this community. I wanted them to see a second chance story. I kind of wanted to rewrite my story to the people that I hurt. And since that time, I have just invested in this community and creating events for this community, creating a community for this community. It's what I do, gathering people together, let them escape the reality, the stresses of their 9-to-5 jobs that they fucking hate, and letting them enjoy life for a little bit.
You know, go a little bit more in detail on that. I guess I've never really asked you this either. As far as everything that happened to you, don't talk about that. You don't have to, but like
here,
a bunch of big things happened to you, right? Like a bunch of stuff came out and you stayed. Like you didn't pack your bag and go somewhere else and start over. You literally stayed in the mud. You stayed in the shit, and you know, pressure makes diamonds, right? And you made some diamonds out of it, but it took time. Talk about that and what you were going through in your mindset.
Yeah, it did. I moved here. I started a church when I was 28 at 33 years old. I had an affair. I lost the church. I lost everything. We had just been named one of the fastest growing churches in America. Canton was a small town. It's a small town now. It was really a small town then. I was on the front page of the paper. Everyone knew me. But the reality is, man, I'm not that guy to be super spiritual or whatever, but I feel called to this community. 18 years ago, I fell in love with this area, North Georgia. This is where I was. I had a lot of people tell me to move away, start over where no one knew me. And but the reality is my kids were here and I wasn't leaving my kids, and my connections were here. Even though my connections were severed at that time, even though my connections were bruised at that time, it was still the only place that I had connections. And so I began to slowly just reinvent myself. I decided that I was going to serve this community, whether or not I had a salary or not. I became a chaplain for the police department, became a chaplain at the local hospital. I did that for a couple of years. And then I just began to hustle, man. I just began to realize, hey, it doesn't matter that I lost everything. My bill collectors don't give a shit, because 30 days later, all the bills started arriving. I was living in someone's basement. I was literally homeless. I had a family let me move into their basement. I went from making 6 figures a year to being homeless, having no family, having nothing. Even my biological family at that time, my parents and stuff, were not too happy with me, as you can imagine. So I was living in someone's basement. I'll never forget, FedEx came and knocked on the door. They had a package, and it was an envelope, and my ex-wife, my current wife at the time, had sent me an envelope full of all the bills that were about that thick. And so I just realized, man, I can't wallow down here in this basement forever. I've got to get busy hustling and got to get busy rebuilding my life. And I've got to figure out a way to make cash quick. And that's what I'd always done, was start stuff. And so I was able to go out there and just start doing things. And one thing led to this thing, that led to that thing, that led to this thing. And the hodgepodge is where I'm at now.
It's wild, man. It's wild. So you did a little bit of roofing as well. Didn't you do that?
That's what I did immediately. So I immediately had a guy hire me to go out and, man, you could sell ice to an Eskimo, all that bullshit that everyone tells you. And about the second day on the job, we're up on a roof, and he shows me how to make hail. Oh, is that hail? And I was like, no, that's not hail. It is now. And he had this little device that made the roof. And I thought to myself, man, I just lost everything. I'm on the front page of the paper for character issues. The last thing I need to do is be part of a roofing company that's scamming people. And at that time, I was super paranoid that everything was going to come out, and everything that I did. So I went home. I got to thinking about it. I thought, man, if that guy can do it, it's not that complicated. I'm going to go start doing it. And so I created an LLC. I went and I had a Jeep Cherokee at the time. I went and got the Jeep Cherokee letter, because unfortunately in Georgia, that's about, at that time, that was all you had to do, was to be a roofer. It was to have an LLC, have a business card, how to go knock on doors. And so I began to knock on doors. And at that time in my life, I made more money than I had ever made in my life. In about 8 months of doing that, I had put about $230,000 in my pocket profit. Had so much work, I couldn't even keep up with it. Had just landed a 27 building apartment complex, and I was killing it. And I hated every minute of it. I despised it. It had no purpose to it. It wasn't fulfilling to me. Going back to, there was no community. So with the money that I had in my pocket, I stepped back, walked away from it, and said, man, I'm just going to take some time and I'm going to figure out what is next. And in the process, I actually began and started another church that I'm still the pastor of. And people find that surprising, because I'm not your typical pastor, but I started a thing called Action Church, and we moved to the poorest part of our town, and we just began to serve people, run a homeless shelter, run the biggest food pantry around, run the biggest clothing closet around, have addictions meeting there almost nightly, every night of the week. And we just found our niche in being the island of misfit toys. I don't take a salary from there. That's why I still hustle all the time. And it's just kind of what I do. It allows me to build my tribe, that allows me then to go out and affect the community through my events.
No, and you've done a fantastic job with it. Like I've said, I mean, that's a roundabout way. That's how we've met, right? Like, from you doing everything that you've done, we've kind of met each other. So David Virgin said, determined mindset, love it. So David Virgin was my boss at Lipsy Logistics, my first sales boss. I still look to him for advice when it comes to stuff like that. And Uncle Randy, I didn't even know Uncle Randy had a LinkedIn. This is breaking news right here.
I don't know that LinkedIn is ready for Uncle Randy to be public on here.
I mean, is he doing this? Is this a debut thing for Uncle Randy, or has he been on here? Like, I did not understand that Uncle Randy's bringing the gimmick over to LinkedIn, to the professional world of what people think is professional.
Yeah. And I don't know that they're ready for Uncle Randy's shoot job, for lack of a better word. I mean, the guy's a pretty smart guy doing some pretty intelligent things.
So what does Uncle Randy do? I
don't know. Something tech or something. You remember the show Friends, and nobody knew what Chandler did?
Yeah, that's what he does.
No one knows what he does. I know it has something to do with IT. He works from home. He's in front of a computer all day. And, I don't know. I always thought it was snorting lines and banging nines. That was just Uncle Randy, but he actually has a real job. So I guess that's what he does.
Dude, I love the podcast you guys do, the Write This Down, Sons, or was that what, Write That Down? Is that what it is?
Write this down. Write that down. He calls it one thing. I call it another thing. We just get on there and rant and rave for an hour once a month.
No, so both of you guys are kind of in the community. Now he's in Canton as well, right? Just kind of a suburb of Canton?
Yep.
Okay. So when are you guys running for office? When do you guys will take over the city office of Canton?
I, about a year and a half ago, did the smartest thing that I ever did, and I moved outside of the city limits. And so while I'm still in Canton, I'm not in the city of Canton anymore. And so no political aspirations for me. I was going to run at one time, and I had this campaign slogan. It was like, are you tired of the typical political bullshit? Try lamb shit. And that was going to be my slogan, but I never ended up running.
Dude, that's hilarious. I love that. That should be on a shirt. That's amazing. Oh, I'm so glad we're doing this. So another thing, you got into events promoting barbecue and brews, I guess is one of your biggest ones. Concerts that you do is pretty big, and festivals. Talk about how you got into the promoting aspect after pastoring.
I had always promoted. So I had built this previous church that I did. We met in a movie theater. We ran thousands of people in this movie theater. And basically we put on a huge event every Sunday. I mean, we would bring in a tractor trailer, 2 U-Haul trucks full of gear, full of equipment. Actually, we had bought, to show you how big of a production it was, we had bought half of U2's old touring gear. And that was what we used in our church. And so we would have 40, 50 guys show up at the movie theater at 3 o'clock in the morning every Sunday, set the entire movie theater up, tear it down before the movie started. We would hold multiple services. And so I had done events my entire life. That's what I had done. We had big days. We were probably the first church in the country. Everybody talks about Cece's helicopter drops where they drop Easter eggs. We did that one Easter. We dropped 125,000 Easter eggs from a helicopter. Literally started a riot in our community. Had 18,000 people show up, backed up the interstate 5 miles both ways. It was horrible. Guy had a heart attack and died in the middle of the egg hunt. And we used to have shirts. You'll still see people wearing shirts that I survived the Easter egg drop around our town. And so I had always done events. We have a big event in the next town up from us called Jeep Fest, and it's for charity. And so one day I'm walking around with Christine, and I'm at Jeep Fest, and Jeep Fest is a great event. And I just looked at her and I said, this is what I'm going to do in my life. She said, what do you mean? I said, I can do this, and I can do this better than they do it. You just got to find a niche. They found a niche that was Jeeps. And at that time I was huge into barbecue. I'd stay up all night. It was kind of my oasis. When I lost everything, I got thrown out. I had a little smoker in my clothes. And so all I had was this little smoker, and I couldn't sleep at night. I would stay up at night, and believe it or not, I found it very therapeutic to stay up at night and just tend to that fire and cook stuff. And so I was really into barbecue at the time. And one of my good friends owned the local brewery here. And so I had this idea to start doing a festival called Barbecue and Brews, and we held it in downtown Canton and had almost 20,000 people the first time. And it was insanity, and it was super successful. And all of a sudden, these other cities started calling us and wanting us to bring it there. And so at that time, I owned the thrift store that you were talking about. And that was how I was providing for my family, and made a lot of money at the thrift store flipping things. Because I had been flipping stuff. I was always hustling out of my garage. But the festivals just took off, and one thing led to another. And then towns started saying, hey, we'd like you to come back twice a year, but we don't want to do barbecue twice a year. Do you have another thing you do? And so I would just make up stuff. Yeah, man, I do taco festivals too. I would just lie to them. You know what I mean? And we put on a taco festival. Or, hey, man, I know this great 80s band. We put on these huge events called Back to the 80s Experience. No, we didn't put on these huge events called Back to the 80s Experience. But we did as soon as they hired us to do it, and we started putting them on. And I figure the bones of all events are the same thing. And so it's just the meat that goes around them. It's the skin that goes on the skeleton is just different. And so going to that Jeep Fest, which actually is this weekend, is what led to me saying, man, I can do this, and this is what I want to do in my life.
And after you learned that aspect, so what year was that roughly? 2000?
Probably 8 years ago or 9 years ago. So 16.
Okay. So
14.
Crazy to think that's only that long ago. But anyways, yeah. So like that's crazy. But then you found pro wrestling.
Yes.
Right. So that was 2018.
Yeah, that was so I guess it was. Yes, 2018.
Okay, so shortly into promoting, you've been promoting your whole life, but you start doing the festivals, and then you kind of jump into pro wrestling. Right. Was that a very similar transition?
Yeah, so that was a transition at that time. My son I grew up like everybody. I loved wrestling, grew up with Ric Flair, grew up watching it, kind of quit watching after what they call the Attitude Era. Hadn't watched it in years. All of a sudden, my son, who was 7 at the time, got into wrestling. I didn't know what independent wrestling was. I'd never been to an independent wrestling show, had never really watched independent wrestling. My son really got into wrestling. I saw a poster for a group called GPW, Georgia Premier Wrestling, that was going to be at a local gym. So I took my son to this local gym, and it was absolutely the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life. All I'd ever seen was wrestling on television, seeing guys that look like wrestlers, guys that look like monsters. All of a sudden I show up and it's your drunk uncle in overalls and they're trying to fight and there's 50 people there. But the problem was my son loved it. I mean, he thought it was the greatest thing in the world to be able to walk around and talk to the wrestlers and to be able to be that close and to have his other friends there screaming and shouting. So the next month I went again. And the next month I went again. And I finally came home one day and I looked at my wife and I said, I can't do this anymore. I love Luke, but it literally is the most miserable 2.5 hours of my life. And she said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to start a wrestling promotion. It can't be that fucking hard. If these inbred idiots can do it, I can surely do it. And I have a good friend named Rich Ward. Rich Ward is the guitar player for a band called Fozzy. The lead singer of Fozzy is a guy named Chris Jericho, who's probably one of the biggest wrestlers ever. And Rich is one of my best friends. And I just told him, I said, I think I'm going to start a wrestling promotion in our building. I had this 32,000 square foot building that has sound, lights, video, anything you could ever want. It's where we hold our church services, but it's also where I was hosting concerts and markets and all kinds of stuff. And so he told me, you need to meet this kid named Dylan. This kid named Dylan works for Diamond Dallas Page. He does all of his video stuff, and he is a wrestler, and he knows all the wrestlers, and he knows how to make videos. And so I met Dylan. I said, hey, I want to start this promotion, but I don't want it to look like an independent promotion. I want you to walk in and be incredible. And we started, and I told Dylan, I said, man, let's do it in 6 months. This is after the first time. I said, let's plan it for 6 months from now. And I got on Facebook the next day and announced we were going to do it, and I announced it for 45 days later. I said, in 45 days, I got excited in the moment. Didn't even tell Dylan that we were going to start in 45 days. I said, man, we're going to start this wrestling promotion. And we started the wrestling promotion, and independent wrestling's weird. They lost their minds. People got really pissed about it. But our first show ever, we had 274 people show up, and it's just grown and grown and grown and grown. And we're coming into year 4 in October. And I mean, we hold the Georgia record. We had 1,063 people at a show one time. We average consistently around that 500 mark. And I still don't know anything about wrestling, to be honest with you. But my wife jokes, she said, you finally found the one thing that allows all your redneckness to go out and shine, because it's just about creating shit and creating drama and stirring the pot. And it's been a release for me in a lot of ways, and I enjoy it. I don't know how much longer I will continue to do it. It's also one of those things. My son has moved on. He's not necessarily into it as much as he used to. He still loves Southern Honor, but now he's into football. Now he's into playing sports. And there's a lot of things that make me a whole lot more money than a $12 wrestling ticket. So I really am intrigued by the promotion part of it. I'm really into the fight game. And you and I have talked about that for years, and we were getting ready to start something right before COVID hit. And so now I've got a connection with the guy, and it looks like we're about to start that back up, and we're shooting for a January launch date on that.
Yeah, and we could talk much more about wrestling, but I'm excited about the MMA aspect of it as well, and the fight game aspect. You know, I'm a huge fan of that, and
Yes.
we did want to try to get something off the ground that just didn't work, mainly because of COVID and some other things. But I think the guy that you're partnered up with for this time to do it is very essential in this process to make this thing go.
It goes back to the wrestling thing. So for me, business is business. I don't care if it's the fight game, if it's a festival, if it's logistics. Business is business. Promoting is promoting. So I can handle the legal aspects, I can handle the financial aspects, and I can handle the promoting aspects. I don't know the fight game. This gentleman, Warren Thompson, he knows the fight game. He knows where the fighters are. People want to come fight for him. He's got his own following and his own gimmick. And Georgia's this weird state where and I don't know if they're called independent promotions in fighting or what, but whatever they're called, local promotions, there's literally one in the state of Georgia, and they've had this monopoly for years, almost a decade now, with knowing else coming along, which makes no sense to me. While I hope they thrive, there's a wide open field. The issue in Georgia is always people can't find a building. I have a building. So that eliminates that aspect of it. And so you and I have been wanting to do something together forever. So we were actually talking about you last night, you being on the commentating team, me and Warren were. And I think it's going to be a fun element. I think we're going to bring something unique to it. And I don't want to know too much about the fight game. That's key to me too. I don't want to know about the fight game because I don't want to know how everyone else is doing it. I'll let Warren worry about what happens in the ring. I'll let him book the matches. I'll let him do his thing. The same thing I let Dylan. I want to bring what I know how to do. I want to bring the tailgating. I want to bring the activities. I want to bring the DJs. I want to bring the party. I want to bring the lights. I want to bring the entertainment aspect to the fight aspect, which is what we did in wrestling, and you've seen the results of it. It's the only promotion you wrestle in for the last 2 years. It's not because you don't get opportunities. It's because that's where you want to be at because of the atmosphere. So I think we have the ability to create something pretty unique. And what's interesting is for me just announcing it, I've already had connections. I've got this guy named Gunnar Miller in Chattanooga that could probably open up some doors in Chattanooga. I've already had a buddy of mine who's in Savannah who is very connected call me about bringing the fights there. I've had a buddy in Macon who's very connected tell me about bringing there. And the beautiful thing is, goes back to, I think everything works out. Portable fighting, portable wrestling doesn't scare me. I did portable church for 5 years and ran thousands of people, was one of the fastest growing. So I know how to take an empty building and turning it into a kick-ass place in a matter of hours with the right equipment. And I have all that equipment. So it makes it easy for us to take that show on the road. And I think the fight game is going to become a vital part of my life and a vital part of my income. And I'm actually taken back by how excited I am to actually get this going.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things, like pro wrestling, there's not a lot of money in pro wrestling, right? Like a lot of people, when I tell them back in the day, especially when I was doing it Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and working full-time in logistics and trying to stay in shape and always on the road by myself, like you don't make money in pro wrestling. You lose money in pro wrestling. Like I lost money for 4 years in pro wrestling trying to pursue the dream, trying to pay my dues. I wasn't paying dues. I was literally paying to wrestle. Like it was right. It was like something that it's like going for a gym membership. Like it was a weekly membership that I had to pay at this certain place to get to this spot to make $20. And people laugh, you make $20. Bro, I was the #1 wrestler in the state of Georgia making $20. So then the question is like, what is everybody else making? Like, and how's that work? Like, it didn't make sense to me.
Well,
and I got a little upset.
And I'll tell you this, even the promoters are not making money. Now, we're blessed a little bit, again, because we own the building. But you would be shocked how little money we make after every show. Now, we make money. I don't want to sit here and bullshit anybody and tell them that we're not making money. But if I had to pay for a building and I had to have insurance on that building because my building already has insurance, we wouldn't make as much money as you think at all. Our goal, believe it or not, is to break even at the door for what payroll is. And then as stupid as this sounds, the money we make actually comes from the concession stand. And so, but I didn't care. I did it for my son. And I learned a lot about it. I learned a lot about live events from doing wrestling. And so that's been huge for me. But even that transition, we talked about this the other day, that transition from wrestling to the fight game is weird because I can schedule a wrestling show for 2.5 hours and know it's going to end in 2.5 hours. I dictate how long the matches are. We were talking about the number of matches for the card. And that's an interesting thing because you can have 4 guys get knocked out in 30 seconds. And all of a sudden you're halfway through your show in literally 15 minutes. And you're scrambling. And so that balance, but I think that's what Warren brings to the table is the experience in that area. And I'm just going to create the show for everybody.
So there's a company that I've promoted several times on my show. And one of the reasons is because my buddy Torres Finney, who is one of the champs and professional MMA fighter now, he's undefeated. He's signed by First Round Management, who's Jorge Masvidal's agent. Right. And he just fought his last fight on the main card of Jorge Masvidal's show. It's whatever it is, right? And he picked up a win. He was training with American Top Team. So, like, I'm in with him, and I kind of understand the behind the scenes and the agent aspect of everything that goes in MMA. And most of the cards they're on, and it's by far the best promotion around our area, Gogi is what it is. Aries Fight Promotion, I believe, is what the fight promotion is. But they have 12 to 15 fights per card, and it varies. It might be a 5 and 6 year old grappling match, amateur. Now you get the families there. It might be a jiu-jitsu match. It might be a kickboxing amateur match. It might be legit wrestling. It might be MMA. And then like your last couple of fights are, this is an amateur title. This is a professional match, just stuff like that. So and those work pretty well because at the beginning, there's probably not going to be any knockouts because it's kids and stuff. You're going to get the full time. Then when you get to the main card, it might go kind of quick, but you've already been there for 2 hours regardless.
Right. It's an interesting thing. I love that. Probably one of my favorite quotes from Dana White is, he said, if you pull up to an intersection and on one corner is the Super Bowl and on the other corner is the World Series happening, and on the other corner is the NBA Finals happening, and on that fourth corner is two rednecks throwing punches, everybody's going to go watch those two rednecks throw punches. It just goes back to our primal nature. I don't care who you are. If you're a man, if you're a woman, there's something that just gets you going about people one-on-one in competition. And I think that fighting is huge. And we've talked about that. Our first show is going to be nothing but amateur, and just to get our feel for everything. And that's okay. That's all it needs to be, because we'll still sell that fucking place out, because it's going to be people in the ring or people in the cage or whatever we end up going, what direction we end up going in, fighting, and people want to watch people fight.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you look at any, major sporting event, when the fight takes place in the stands between two drunk fat idiots, nobody's even watching the show. They're all watching the guys fighting, right? And UFC, I just went to SummerSlam here recently. I've been to the Daytona 500, or not Daytona, I've been to Bristol. I've played at Nebraska. I've played at Alabama, Auburn. I've played at these huge arenas in front of hundreds of thousands of people. I've been to 5 UFC events. They're my 5 favorite live events that I've ever been to, back to back to back to back to back.
Right.
It's like gladiators. You hear the leather hitting people. The whole crowd is electric. There's very little fluff in between fights. It's 100% the best live event you can go to when it comes to sports. And if you can bring that locally and do it a pretty good job like you did Southern Honor, you will crush in Canton. Yeah,
I think that they're probably more so than anything that I've ever been involved in. I think this fight thing, this fight game, has the single most potential of anything. Because I do think even what's lacking in the fight game is there's a lot of ex-fighters and a lot of lifers running the promotions, and there's no promoters running the promotions, and there's no event people running. And so you show up at these events. I went to a local fight recently, and it was good, and I had fun because it was 2 guys fighting. But the logistics was horrible. I mean, down to how I got my tickets to walk in and trying to figure out where I was supposed to sit, and the way they had the chairs laid out, and the flow of the show was just not good. And I thought to myself, if you simply hired an event organizer and let them fine tune some things here, you'd have a fun show. And I think UFC gets away with that because obviously they do have the logistics, but even that, there's not a lot of entertainment. It's fights. And you and I have talked about that. If they would learn how to tell storylines and build up stuff and have the video arcs and make the show, Thrilla learned that a little bit in their boxing. It's not the best boxing matches in the world, but it's the greatest show in the world. They say when you go to those shows, they're a fucking blast. And I think that's the key. I think that's what we did right with wrestling is we didn't focus on wrestling fans, because here's what we knew. Wrestling fans were going to come to our show no matter what. They were going to come no matter what. How do we make wrestling the in place in Canton for people that don't give 2 shits about wrestling? We made it fun. We had Rich Ward up on stage. We had the funeral portrait playing. We brought in big time stars. We had David Arquette running out during shows. We had it set up where, man, it was just a party to be at every month. And I think we can do the same thing with fighting, because the fight fans are going to come no matter what. Now, how do we get the party fans? How do we get in a city that doesn't have a lot going on, in a county that doesn't have a lot going on? If we can become the place to come hang out, party, meet people, have some drinks, have a good time, I think we'll nail it in.
Yeah, no, I think you will. I think you really will. So moving on a little bit, have you ever talked or do you do any like consulting for guys that want to get into promoting, get into planning, get into any of this entrepreneur type of work? Do you ever consult with any guys?
A large portion of my life is spent doing that. It's kind of an informal thing. I do charge guys. I have other guys I just meet with. It's kind of a weird thing. I actually had to bring a systems guy in one time to examine my life because in my mind, I don't have a system. In my mind, I run, I deal with the chaos. I just make it happen. But this guy educated me. He said, no, you have a system. You just don't realize you have a system. He said, so you need to bring me in for the weekend of an event and let me watch you all weekend long. Let me watch you leading up to the event. And he educated me pretty much on some steps that I take. And he said, it's funny. You have a pattern to promoting. You always have to find an enemy. He goes, you're the only guy I know that can start a farmer's market. And you're going to make the farmer's market across town your enemy to get everyone pumped up about you're the best farmer's market in the world. And it's funny. I caught myself doing that today with the fight game. I made a post about the fight game and putting other people out of business. And so it's funny. Everybody has a system, even if you don't realize you have your system. And a huge part of my system, though, is my tribe, is my team. It's the people that come around me and believe in what I do. And, I'm probably as good as they come at letting my people do their thing. Here's what I want as the end result. I don't give a shit how you get there. I just want this to be the end result. If you go around your ass to your elbow to get there, that's on you. Just make sure this happens. If you bust it out quick. And so my team believes in me. And I have amazing people. Like I literally don't have one full-time staff person. And you'd find this shocking 75% of the people that do stuff for me are volunteers. They don't even want a salary. They just want to be part of something bigger than themselves. People love being connected and they love feeling like they're making a difference. And so I have a lot of people that just volunteer their time to be part of something bigger and to have that connection with me and our events.
Yeah, and it just goes back to community. Like I said, like you just do a great job. And that's the community I'm talking about, the community of people that want to work for you, the community of people that want to help you put together events and be a part of something bigger for Canton. That's really the community. Like we always joke, maybe even behind your back in a way, like as far as the shows, it's like, all right, well, Southern Honor did, 400 people this week. That means we did 150 over Gary's normal crowd. Like right. We just know that you're getting a certain amount of people just because of you that you put on the event. Absolutely. So anything over that is kind of what the boys get to say, take credit for.
Me, I needed for my own self and my own self-esteem. I intentionally started running some other towns with my festivals and stuff because I wanted to know, man, am I just drawing in Canton because of my name? And it took me a while. It took me to figure out how do I run Cartersville? How do I run LJ? How do I run these festivals in other areas where when I jump on there live, they don't know who the fuck Gary Lamb is, so it doesn't mean anything, but I have to sell the event. And so that stretched me and has taught me while I build a lot on me, I'm learning to build the excitement of the event now.
So go back real quick to how you promote. And the way I notice you promote as well is you do pick an enemy. You like to create chaos. You like to create a little controversy. And I think that's the best way to promote coming from pro wrestling. And that's the way I like to promote on LinkedIn and stuff. That's just the way, that's the way that I've grabbed the most attention. I told my guys here, this is probably about December. I said, you know what? I'm about to pro wrestling LinkedIn. And they was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I'm just going to pro wrestling LinkedIn. Like, I'm just going to do everything I'd do if I was a pro wrestler starting over, except towards sales and freight brokering on LinkedIn. And it's blown up pretty quick since January. What are some tips you would tell somebody or people you would tell somebody to look at as far as promoters? Like, who do you grab inspiration from? And why did you go the cash is controversy route?
I mean, obviously the old school guys. I mean, I love P.T. Barnum. I mean, how can you not? The guy sold a circus. You know what I mean? This is probably going to offend some people. And I want you to hear my heart when I say this, because if you're religious, if you're a Christian, I'm not trying to be offensive to you. But I take a lot of inspiration from megachurch pastors, because think about it. In terms of business, I'm not saying they're selling this. So let me make this very clear. But their product is Jesus. A guy you can't see, a guy you can't talk to, a guy you can't touch. And then they're getting people to volunteer. So they get people to work for them for free. But not only do you have to work for me for free, you have to pay me 10% of your income to be able to work for me. The greatest promoters in the world are pastors. They're getting on stage and they're selling a product. So for me, after years and years, and I wasn't selling a product, man, I am a Christian. I believe Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through him. I believe that. But it was easy for me to sell wrestling. It was easy for me to sell roofs. It was easy for me to sell thrift store stuff. Those are things that are tangible, that you can touch, that you can smell, that you can see. I've been selling a God for years that no one could see, touch. It was faith. You know what I mean? And so I take a lot of inspiration from that. But P.T. Barnum, I mean, Walt Disney was the ultimate promoter. And currently, man, I eat, drink, and sleep everything, Dana White, obviously, but everything that Jesse Cole of the Savannah Bananas does. And I couldn't be any more different than Jesse Cole. I'm not going to walk around in a yellow tuxedo and a yellow top hat. And I think a lot of his stuff comes across as goofy and sometimes corny. But here's the deal. That's who Jesse is. And I think that's the key to promoting. Be authentic to who you are. So what I've learned from him is I can eat the meat and throw away the bones. I don't have to be corny and cheesy because it's not who I am. I'm going to be the foul mouth, raise hell, probably get into a fight like happened this last week, guy, and still be who I am, because authentically that's who I am. And I have this discussion with people all the time. I say, you might not like me on this podcast. You might not like me on Sunday mornings when I teach. But if you don't like me in one place, you're going to like me in no place, because I am who I am all the time. This is not a gimmick to me. It's not a character to me. Yes, I embellish it. Yes, I play up the black sheep aspect. Yes, I take it to a whole nother level in those areas. But at the end of the day, this is who I am. I'm not trying to be somebody else. And so I think if you're going to promote, you've got to be authentic and find your niche and find your style. And chaos, when I moved here and started this church 18 years ago, there was no such thing as a contemporary church in this area. I ruffled every feather there was, pissed off every person in this town, because it was a very steeped in religion town. And we came in meeting in a movie theater, rock and roll music, and the preacher preaching barefoot and blue jeans. No one had ever seen that before. So chaos creates cash, or, controversy creates cash, to quote Eric Bischoff, has just always worked for me, and it's who I am. I don't know that it works for everyone else. If you're not going to legitimately buy into it and be willing to be chewed out at a restaurant, there's times my wife comes to me, she says, can we go on a date? And I'm like, absolutely. She goes, no. I mean, can we go on a date 2 hours away where nobody knows us and no one's going to interrupt us and no one's going to come over to the table and cuss you out tonight, or no one's going to come over and tell you how much they love you? Can we go somewhere 2 hours away and have a date? Because I live the gimmick 24/7, because the gimmick is real. And so I think promoting, figure out your niche, figure out what you do, and then just take it up a level. Like you said, you're going to pro wrestle LinkedIn White, because that's who you are. You're a pro wrestler, and it's what you do, and it's what you know. I don't want to see Gunnar Miller on here in a suit and tie talking about the ins and outs of logistics. Because of my relationship with you, it's amazing how much of my connections are logistics guys. And you stand out. You're a purple cow among those people. And I've learned, even in my short time on LinkedIn, which I haven't been on much, I don't post much, I don't pay for the premium services or anything, I've made some pretty key connections, a lot of those through you. But the stuff I write, because it's so different than everyone else, resonates. And it's amazing how pissed off people have got from stuff I've written in my DMs and everything. I'm like, then why do you read it? Who gives a shit? It's my opinion on business. You don't like it, go fuck yourself. But that's not the LinkedIn world, because everybody else is on here to connect and network because they're looking for jobs. I'm not looking for a fucking job. I am a job. I have my own job, so I can be honest and do what I want to do. And if you don't want to be friends with me or connections with me or likes with me, guess what? I still get up in the morning. I still get paid.
I love that. Yeah, that was when I was like, I'm a pro wrestling LinkedIn. I was like, I'm just going to be myself. I'm going to stop shying away from football. I'm a meathead, weight room junkie football player. That's what I've done since I was 6. Why am I going to hide that? Doesn't mean I'm not smart or can't figure out business or whatever. It's got me to where I am. But like, I'm a meathead junkie weight room football player. That's what I am, right? That's what I look like.
And I'll tell you this, you taught me some things, because one of the things, especially when I got on LinkedIn, and I'm embarrassed to almost say this, is I was a little embarrassed to post anything about Southern Honor, because I thought, man, what are these business professionals going to think about the fact that I own a wrestling promotion? Like, the most low-hanging fruit in people's mind backwood things there are. And then I saw you posting about it, and my wife was like, when have you ever given 2 fucks what someone thinks about you? And I was like, you're right. I don't give a shit. So I'm going to talk about who I am and what I do. And the riches are in the niches. And so people will catch on and they'll like it. And I'm blue collar to the bone. My network is blue collar to the bone. I don't have millionaire IT friends, but I got several millionaire friends that own plumbing companies and construction companies and build water treatment plants and own trucking companies. And that's who I am. And that's what keeps this country running. And that's what they need. The blue collar, the people of America need a voice, and they need someone to come along and say, listen, success isn't sitting taking Instagram photos in front of my Lamborghini, but here's what I'm doing. Here's my home. Here's my family. Here's the truck I'm driving because I'm out there busting my ass every day and I'm making more money than you are. I joke that we're the Clampets of our neighborhood. Man, when we show up at the pool, it's like the fucking white trash patrol is rolled up. But man, I live in a neighborhood full of lawyers and judges and influencers in my community. And then there's the lambs. But guess what? I live there because I'm living the same lifestyle they live, being real to who I am.
No, I love it, man. I absolutely love it. And that's why, you just kind of hit it off so quick. I've enjoyed our friendship, and I want to work with you more and do things. I think that we could do some great things down the road, whatever it is, whatever it might be, whether it's Chattanooga, Canton, whatever. I
think the fight thing is going to be the first element. And we've joked, we're going to be in business together one day. I don't know what that looks like and when that happens. And I've told you for years, since the day I met you, that even you, and I think you're beginning to realize it, but I still don't think you realize it. Your name and your gimmick, for lack of a better word, the people's captain, you literally could be the mayor of Chattanooga. If you know what I mean, you could play those cards right and build something there that is unmatched. And you're starting to get that vibe and realize that. And I mean, I have to remind myself, I'm fucking old, dude. I'm 46 years old. You're still in your 20s, you fucking young buck.
I'm not. I'm 31. I'm 31. I'm an old man now.
31. Never mind. My bad. You're fucking old. No, but I mean, you've got plenty of time to take over that town, but you will own that town one day. And I tell people all the time, Gunnar Miller will be a multimillionaire one day. And he will be, because you know what you're doing. You're ambitious. You got the right partner in life that supports what you do and lets you be you. And that's huge in my life. Getting Christina in my life was huge because she was the first person who didn't try to change me. I was a notch toned down from what she grew up with her dad. So like her whole life, she was Rick Cope's daughter. Now she's Gary Lamb's wife. I'm easy compared to Rick. And so, but she's never tried to change me. She embraces all the crazy that I do, and she's thankful for it. And so that's huge. And you have that in your life.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate those kind words. But yeah, honestly, Tia meeting her allowed me to take a little bit of a risk, and it worked out to get to that next level. Now it's, what's next? How do we get to that next level?
Yes. I didn't know you before this. So let me preface this. I didn't know you before this. But I think, and I don't know if the viewers will even know what we're talking about, but I think the Marco stunt thing changed you. I think before that, Gunnar Miller was cross his T's, dot his I's, play the right game. I'm the captain of the football team. I do what I'm supposed to do. And then you realize, man, fuck it. Even when I do what I'm supposed to do, people are going to turn on you that said they're my friends, that people said that I've grown up with. So fuck them. If they're just going to stay pissed off at me anyway, I'm going to do what I want to do, how I want to do it. And going back, because I'm a Facebook stalker, I stalked you before that. You definitely have become a different person since that. Not full of hostility, not full of bitterness, but you've just been like, man, I'm my own person. Like me, love me, I don't really care.
Yeah, and I got a lot of that from you and some other guys that I follow online that you put me on to, and some guys that I found on myself. And literally it was, dude, who gives a fuck what anybody thinks about whatever the fuck I want to do? And when I started thinking like that, like a lot of people don't like that word. Like you said, a naughty word. It's like, who gives a fuck what you think I think is naughty? Like who came up with the cuss words? Like I'll go back to that argument.
You don't put food on my table.
Yeah.
You don't put a roof over my head. And so, and you'll come to the stage. Now, I'll tell you an interesting thing. I dealt with this in the last year and a half. So I love the city of Canton. I've given my life to the city of Canton. We had a change politically in our local government, went from red from blue to blue. I don't want to get political here, but they came to me where I made a large portion of my money, and they started dictating the events that I did on their property, how they would be done. And that was gut check time for me, because I was like, man, do I lose 70% of my income, or do I cater to them? And man, I swear, I mean, I can remember being in the bathroom dry heaving because my family and being stressed and not sleeping for days as I fought that battle. And ultimately, I had to decide, even though they put food on my table through these events, they can go fuck themselves. And I told them to go fuck themselves. And I lost 70% of my income. And in one fucking month, I had more cities reaching out to me to replace that income, to the point now that I'm turning down events because I stood on my morals, I stood on my convictions, and I believe when you do that, people will always come along. And here it is. I love this town. I run events in this town and can't even put on events for my city anymore on city property because I told them to go fuck themselves. But I didn't miss. Matter of fact, I'll make more money since I walked away from them than when I had them in my life.
That's usually how that works. All right, Gary. Well, hey, we're about 45 minutes in. I ask everybody this question when they come on, and with you, I want you to kind of give your perspective of it. What's one tip you'd give to somebody coming out of high school or college, whatever it is, as they're hitting the ground running with their career?
Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Learn whatever field that you want to be into, examine that field, and try to find 4 to 5 different revenue streams that can go back to that field. That's one thing I kind of take it personal sometimes when people tell me, they said, man, he's shotgun approach to everything. I do have a lot of things going on, but the key is all those things all go back to events. They're all different events, but at the end of the day, they're events. Even the t-shirt company, it goes back to events. We make most of our money at my events selling t-shirts. And so examine the niche that you're in, whether it's logistics or whatever, and figure out the different revenue streams in that thing. That way, if you lose one of those revenue streams, you can ramp up the other revenue streams. I think that's the key to anything, because if you're coming right out of high school, I would tell you, man, figure out who you are and know your man, you don't know that shit coming out of high school. You're 18 years old. You're still thinking, well, your dick. You know what I mean? That's all you care about. So that would be foolish advice. I could give it to you and it's going to go in one ear and out the other. But look at what you want to do and look at the different revenue streams in that field. I don't know if I got turned on to them by you or not, but some diesel podcast guy I follow, I'm connected with. He put some girl up there today, and I guess he's starting the diesel shit. I don't know, the diesel chick podcast or something.
Yeah.
Oh, fucking how genius. Like, how genius. In a world full of men, let's put this blonde up there who probably knows that a diesel engine inside and out more than anybody, and she's going to do a podcast about that. Go for it, man. And but learn the different revenue streams, whether it's in my line of work, there's podcasting, there's consulting, there's events, there's large events, there's small events, there's merch, there's so many there's concession stands, there's so many different avenues that are all income streams back to the same event. It's not just ticket sales for me.
No, I love that, and I appreciate all that. Well, dude, thanks for coming on. I know you're busy. I know it's right in the middle of the day.
Love it.
We both got things going on. I appreciate it. Hey, let's do something. Let's do this a little more often, and because we have a good dynamic, and we can kind of talk about whatever. This is more of a backstory of Gary Lamb. We could actually dive into some topics for 15, 20-minute segments later on down the road.
You let me know anytime. My schedule is pretty flexible. You know that.
All right, brother. Well, I appreciate you, man.
Hey, talk to you later.
See you, buddy.